Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. A quick update on Powerledger POWR on the exchange. Certainly a project I followed for a long time. I don't have a giant holding of Powerledger, but we've definitely made it apparent on this channel over the years of how important this blockchain and AI integration is in relation to the energy sector. Now, of course, the energy sector is a magnitude of millions, if not trillions of dollars worth of value. And within this, there's so many complexities from the wholesale aspect, carbon credits, how it's traded, how we as end users are consuming this energy. Prices are dictated to us, standard rates. I'm assuming it's the same elsewhere in the world, but we have standard rates, and then you actually have your usage unit rates as well. What actually coincides with the prices behind all this? There are so many variables, and we're getting to a situation, I think, in my opinion, where the world's getting more and more frustrated, more angry, especially with things like energy prices and bills. Yet we're going down the renewables route, which has been portrayed to us over the last 10-20 years or so significantly, that this is the way forward. Coal, etc., even though I think like the coal plants are actually being built more so than ever before, if I from my readings. But irrespective of the narrative, you can't stop all of this half the time. So the only other option, as Raoul Paul says, is you have to invest in it. And I think that's what we've been kind of focusing on this channel. We'll go into a bit more of a deep dive on that, on some of those aspects in a moment. Of course, don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you have not done so already. Welcome to the channel if you're new. And please do hit the like button as well if you enjoy the content. It helps obviously reach new audiences and portray these messages and information more so than it would normally do. So let's have a quick look. So Powerledger, for those that don't know, very much orientated as a blockchain to enhance and improve the energy sector using, of course, blockchain's protocols of transparency, speed, efficiency, you name it, all across there. The AI integration is quite interesting as well. We did a really cool interview with Dr. Vivek. God, that must have been like nearly 2 years ago now. I need to do a refresh with those guys. About the implementation of AI, how the real data aspect, the algorithmic information on trends, supply, demand, alongside blockchain can really accelerate how energy is not only used, how it's consumed, and us to become potentially prosumers. That element, for those that didn't know or don't know, is where you and I can prosume, as in taking the energy that we get from our solar panels, or and if you randomly got a wind turbine in your garden or something, but any energy that's absorbed into the battery, instead of using it yourself, you got excess, you can sell it back onto the grid. Now, some of that application has been around for a while, back to the national grid, but things are slightly changing. There's a lot of legislation going through at the moment, not just in the UK, but worldwide, to get some form of legalities of how that can actually be distributed around the world, using the likes of Web3, Internet Protocol, to share that. And carbon credits and things like this is a very interesting topic of how it actually goes through the networks. We're not actually, I mean, we obviously have gas coming through the pipes and electricity, of course, through the wires, but the actual trading mechanism of the units aspect is quite phenomenal, really, where it's a bit of a mind bender when you look at how that's traded and how that's potentially manipulated as well. In some ways, sometimes fraudulently also. We'll talk about that in a second, because that's a big instance of blockchain's ability, and certainly what Powerledger is helping towards in terms of eradication of that. So there's a multitude of factors within Powerledger that make it a really prominent project and company in this space. As I said, it's a multi-trillion-dollar market, really, the energy sector. Everyone uses it, right? We cover another project called Energy Web. So they're slightly different in certain ways. But what I would say with Powerledger, they've got a fantastic team behind them. The technology is amazing. More recently, we won't delve too much into this because we covered this topic quite a while back, But their change over to the Solana network was very interesting at the particular time, because they analyzed that in the future we're going to need more capability here. This transactions per second is a really important part. I will reiterate this pretty much on every video because it's important. This is not just about financial transactions, you and I passing money back and forth. A transaction, a transfer of an action, is literally anything and everything you could possibly think of that can now be digitalized. So that could be carbon credits. It could be not filling your car up anymore, but charging your car up, going through potentially wireless chargers in the near future. All of these movements, these biometric things, getting into driverless cars, they are all transfers and actions. You can imagine that simultaneous with anything and everything internet based, and everything that we're doing physically or digitally needs to be processed and validated. So these numbers need to be really much higher. And the powerful networks like Solana have offered that. That's why Powerledger kind of moved away from previous chains that it used in the past. Obviously using Ethereum still to an extent on the bridging aspect, but now utilizing Solana here for that scalability perspective. It's ironic because I just did a Harmony 1 video, and one of the key topics about that was scalability. It was a huge narrative a few years ago. It still is very important, obviously, but narratives have moved more so into deep in infrastructural crypto, AI related, of course. But we must always remember the foundations. If successful companies want to make it in this crypto world, or utilizing the tokenization aspect, scalability is something that has to be or at least one of the major forefront points to be looking at. So it made that move. It's now got other platforms within its structure. Here, for example, with TraceX, this heavily relates around RECs. So for those that kind of don't know what that is, that's a Renewable Energy Certificate. And it's basically like, I guess, an instrument that what would be about, not an instrument as such, it's kind of like a documentation, to be honest, which represents the proof of a megawatt hour of electrical generation with renewable energy sources. So that's where we go back to the point earlier about solar, for example, and wind. So it plays very much a crucial role, to be honest, in encouraging that clean energy production, but also allowing companies to be as sustainable as possible and certifying that. And why is that important? Well, because of the new ESG goals from the COP26 and all this nonsense conferences that go on worldwide, and they fly with their private jets to get to them, etc., whilst we pay like peasants to our energy bills. The element there is that companies should try and be more environmentally friendly, more sustainable. And in that recognition, a lot of companies in the past or more recent times have lied about their targets or what they've achieved from their targets so far, and ultimately their goals. And this reflects backwards now to the fact that there isn't really much transparency. There's a lot of fraudulent activity out there. So now companies and even banks, which we covered in a previous video, have been fined billions upon billions of pounds for not following this aspect. So it helps with that aspect of the sustainability goals for organizations to meet that, and a certification of that renewable energy. But with the integration of blockchain technology, that's obviously the important part. It helps to enhance the transparency, the traceability, and of course the security aspect as well, and fraud. Now the fraud aspect is huge. I did a bit of research in that for this video in particular. Who pays for the actual cost of the fraud? Well, this ultimately sometimes comes down to cost towards regulatory bodies. It goes towards the producers. It can go towards companies in general, but also consumers, us, right at the end. So you can imagine that many companies, fraudulent activity or misplacing data and information for their recs. If that transparency wasn't there and they're getting away with it, or they know that it's happening, or they get fined, most of the time it gets passed on to us, right? So it's a really important thing for us as end users or consumers of energy to understand this a bit more. There was a study that I looked in, so it estimated that fraud could inflate REC prices by as much as 10 to 15% in certain markets. That's quite a lot. So where there's a renewable energy industry, which generates approximately, I think, just in the US, $500 billion annually alone, I think, you can imagine that there's a lot of risk within those billions upon billions of dollars as well. So for example, in the EU, there's fines for environmental violations that can range from 500,000 euros to up to 10 million euros. So there's a lot of money involved in the legality aspect and the compliance aspect as well. So you've got all those things. You've got the aspect of environmental impact. What's the cost associated towards other areas of the world if you're not playing ball and you're doing nonsense things in the energy market, or consuming energy in the wrong way, or not proving what you're doing and not doing? That can have an impact elsewhere, and ultimately then again we will pay for that for sure. But the annual REC trading volume, I believe, is around $2 billion. Fraudulent RECs could represent up to 5 to 10% of the market, so causing a potential of 200 million each year, with obviously that rising as more people and more companies get involved in this particular area. So blockchain can essentially help with the aspect of authentication, the verification of it, and the transparency, and also the traceability. Not just the traceability of the RECs, but also traceability of energy in general. We can see the whole entire pipeline, for a better word, and excuse the pun on that, when it comes to energy. So there's a load of really interesting multitude areas of how blockchain and AI is being integrated into the energy sector. And I think one thing for sure is that it will definitely benefit the end user eventually, and also eventually, if we do becoming prosumers, we can have access to our own sort of trade platforms and ability to share that. Now, the good thing, or hopefully the good thing, with blockchain and AI as well, is it will stop us from like monopolizing as well, like companies do all over the world already with energy. So it means that if I've got excess energy, I want to sell it to you, I'm not going to make up a number and go, oh, you really need this, I'm going to charge like 5-10 times the price that it normally is. It'll be on normal rates. You'll still get reward for it, and that reward could be put towards other bills. It could be towards investment. Whatever you want to do with the money is down to you, obviously. No doubt the banks these days will probably ask you what you're doing with it and where's it come from, but they won't question you if you go and spend it in the casino. It's really bizarre. But as I said, that's phenomenal. And the AI market in general, in the energy sector, is worth, at the moment, I think it's around like 8.91 billion. They're estimated to be around 58 billion by 2030. The blockchain aspect is around 1.5 billion by 2026. So up from the 127 million, I believe, which was the last statistic around 2018. The growth is phenomenal. So when we relate to some of these projects like Powerledger, and we're looking at what they're doing technologically and what they're providing as a service and what the sector is that they're working in, you see those monetary values, you see the concern, the problem. They've already got solutions for these. So it's now about the implementation aspect. And I think when we look at the price points of Powerledger over history, we'll go into the chart. Actually, to be fair, it's probably a good time to do that rather than the coin market cap one. But you can see here that we're still very much under the radar, Powerledger, and most energy related projects are, to be honest, as many other infrastructure ones and real world requirement assets are as well. We can see that there's plenty of opportunity in the future. So if we fast forward potentially to like 2028, 2030, especially when those ESG goal targets are really detrimental at those target areas of the years, and beyond that, we could see that there could be a potential big pattern of upward trend where more and more people jump in and go, well, what's powering this? What are the solutions in this area that are outside the usual stock markets and things like that? Because this technology is so unique and different to what's out there already. And more companies are getting more educated around blockchain and AI utility. It's a whole completely new ballgame. It's a new economy. It's a new requirement, really, for infrastructure, education, and, of course, personnel. People, or probably robotics at that time, but for people to have the expertise in this area. And there's not enough of that yet. So there's a great economy to come. And I think that will be portrayed in the crypto markets as well, particularly for the energy sector related tokens. So you see the previous all-time high, which are marked up here. It's not unfortunately on this data chart, which sat around, I believe, $1.33. So there's still a lot of movement left from now to there for hitting that previous all-time high. In the last runs in 2021, we got as high as around about $1. And in the last sort of like, I would say, a slight increase in 2024, when most of the market was rising for deep-in. I think that's one of the key things about decentralized infrastructures. It did sort of rally up to that sort of 55, 56. So if we can get a proper bull run in 2025, along the aspect of further adoption, further case studies, implementations. Now, for me, I'm long-term with Powerledger in that sense. I'm happy to accumulate at this sort of 20 to 30 cent mark. Yes, of course, great to have got it at 12 and 15 if you did in those 2023 bear markets. But the next point in times is around these sort of areas. And if we can calculate that into the metric of the data that we see in front of us and the previous fib levels that we've drawn many times in the past with Powerledger, we can see that there's plenty of opportunity for growth. So the argument is, well, where could we get to in 2025? So if all these things align, I'd be very surprised if we didn't hit the previous all-time high, irrespective of the fact that this industry is still very early. It's still not fully adopted or integrated. I think by 2028 and 2030, you're probably looking at way beyond the $4 or $5 mark. We'll see. But for this year in particular, I know I've been conservative with a lot of the assets that I've been talking about the last couple of weeks when it talks about predictions, because I don't really like doing predictions, but I go on based on what I can see in front of me. You can make elaborate predictions yourselves if you want, of course, or other channels might do, but conservatively I think we could definitely hit that previous all-time high, and who knows, we might push to that 162 or maybe even that 255 mark. But so many things have to occur for that to happen. A lot of narrative, a lot of information. The narratives at the moment in this year at the moment are AI, of course, AI agents in particular. Will we see a more of an infrastructure conversation further down the line? Who knows? But there are some critical changes in the world right now with legislation and standardizations for crypto in general, for the utilization of physical and digital assets being used on blockchain, and of course things going on with the energy sector as well. So whether it's this year or in 2028, the point being is there's still good movement for growth, and Powerledger is definitely a top player in the energy sector area. There aren't too many others that are either fully dedicated like Powerledger are to the sector, or at least have an incremental aspect in their portfolio of services towards this sector themselves. I know like Algorand and Hedera, for example, have some areas that fall into that category, but Powerledger, Energy Web, etc. are fully dedicated to this particular industry. So definitely a positive to think about. At the moment, in terms of the buying pressure here, it's very stable the last few weeks. It has slowly started gradually rising in the last week or so. You can see that upward trend movement. So I'm just sitting there to see if we come back towards retesting 25 or 20 cents again. But in general, from June last year, we can see there's a lot of sideways traction. In fact, between these markers of 40 cents and, well, kind of just under 20 cents, to be honest, there hasn't been too much movement outside of those particular areas currently. So the RSI is on the bottom left here showing 55.53, which is why I'm suggesting that at the moment, we're in this bit of a dilemma at the moment of sideways movements. I think the whole market's been doing this, to be honest. It's not just Powerledger. Performance indicators on the right-hand side are good and positive. We can take that into the next belt up potentially. But I'm just waiting to see the whole Trump administration going live, of course, in a couple of weeks' time. Around April time, of course, there's a lot of financial things going on in the world as well. And, of course, potential interest reductions. And, of course, towards November, we have the new RTGS systems being fully switched on as well. So from that June to November time, it's going to be really interesting. This is where I think that we could see the whole entire market go mental. And that's when we rely on things like communities, marketing, the actual projects themselves, pushing the boundaries of what we're trying to achieve here. It's the best option for them for marketing purposes, getting the all eyes on them, getting them trending on social media, getting them trending in business. That's what it's ultimately all about at the moment with tokens and coins, to be honest. Not just the utility of them, of course, but the tokenization aspect in terms of marketing is absolutely phenomenally powerful in this market that we're in. So that's very much a wrap up, guys. I want to try and keep up to 20 minutes. Please let us know your comments below on Powerledger. If you're new to it, if you want more information, let me know, or check out the previous videos that I've done. Do leave your predictions and your thoughts as well over the next few days of your 2025 predictions in the future as well. We'll come back to Powerledger in the next coming weeks. We'll see how it progresses in the chart. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.